So it was a creation of an ecosystem with small companies co-located with our staff in an R&D site of close to 3,000 people.
Novel in that you've combined people from all these different disciplines and different interests, focused on different innovative goals. But they're not necessarily competing with each other. They're sharing information in a way that we don't necessarily see people share information. So can you tell me a little bit about what it takes to truly create an open innovation environment?
Yeah, so I think one very important factor here is the fact that we are disaligned when it comes to commercial objectives. So it is an environment where you don't risk a lot by sharing knowledge and information. And I wouldn't actually call it open innovation, because the innovation in many cases has already been done. So for the small companies, it's about allowing them to commercialize or further develop that innovation. But the key cool thing about it is all the serendipity that happens when you mix companies from basically 4 different industry verticals. So AstraZeneca is a pharma company, but what we have done is to invite companies that are in the ICT sector. We have companies in the diagnostics sector. We have companies in medtech, combined with companies focusing on drug development the same way as we do. So it's really a melting pot of different technologies where we believe the future of innovation for pharma will reside in moving vertically across these different value chains. So I think all it took was a good idea, to be honest. But it's a bit unorthodox to say that we should not focus on our own product interests. It's all about, creating a different arena for innovation to happen.
Absolutely. It's definitely not, say, the logical path, right? It's definitely a more innovative, even just approach and thought on how to tackle supporting commercialization in small business and pharma. Can you tell me a little bit about what were the obstacles internally and externally? I can imagine, as this is something that's not very common at all, you definitely came up against some challenges.
Oh, where should we start? Kidding aside, so we have set this up as a private-public partnership. So when we approach the part of the Swedish government that supports innovation, they were actually not geared up to support this. It was too innovative for the innovation system. So I think that was the first hurdle. That in Europe we have what is called the European aid rules that basically guides governments and official bodies in how they can support the innovation. And what we were trying to do was not even part of the framework they have considered when they constructed the rules. So that was the first obstacle, I would say, which we nicely managed to circumvent by reading a lot of legal text, which is not too fun, but it was needed. And the second obstacle, or I wouldn't call it an obstacle because in reality it wasn't, but I had to believe that, so we are supporting these companies and allowing them access to our people. And the people who own those resources, my view was that it would be challenging to release resources to support a third party. And AstraZeneca has no rights to anything that goes on in these companies. So it's a very, very loose legal arrangement. We have not even a first right of refusal, nothing. So I was afraid that the resource owners should be hesitant releasing the resources. But that turned out to be a walk in the park, honestly, because the benefits are so great.
Can you talk a little bit about those benefits? Like, what were some of the surprising, the surprises sort of along the way that people didn't necessarily anticipate but really embrace?
Yeah. Let me back off a bit before I come into that. So basically, in I would say any industry today, if you are a researcher or product developer or whoever, and you propose a collaboration to your management, that is normally presented as a business case. A business case is at the bottom line, somebody will look for, okay, so what's the return on investment? What's the risk-adjusted net present value of this endeavor we are facing? And I got a bit disappointed with the fact that unless we can predict the outcome of what we do, then we can't calculate the return on investment. And then we have no foundation for making a decision. In other words, we say no to everything we don't understand. And will that result in disruptive innovation? I question it. So what we tried to do was to build an ecosystem where you put the monetary aspects out of the equation early on. They will end up in there anyway at the end. But how do we pave the way for that curiosity to drive behaviors and curiosity to drive innovation, rather than an anticipation of hard facts? And I think the greatest outcome of this has been that it turned out to be a valid hypothesis. We see a lot of cool things happen simply by allowing curiosity, and I mean, the way you describe it, the intersection, things happen there, but you can never predict them.
Right.
And we have a business model in industry that is based on predictions. So by taking those predictions out of the equation, suddenly all rules for innovation have changed and things start to happen.
Right. Well, we think speed is the new IP, and I mean, I think that that curiosity is so key that you're talking about right now, because a lot of times business decisions are made based on feasibility, ROI, time, a lot of logical parameters. But we definitely at Medici are an approach that we talk about really is a big proponent of leading with passion, curiosity, even discomfort, because sometimes the uncomfortable spaces are those spaces that people aren't exploring. Which I feel like is a little bit of what you're doing, because this was not naturally comfortable at first, but you knew you were onto something and you were very curious about it. So I think that's fascinating.
Curiosity did not only kill the cat, it's also created the BioVenture Hub.
I love it. That's wonderful.
No, but kidding aside, Jasmine, I think it's also important to have, you really tier 3 strategies, or whatever you call it. As soon as you move outside your corporation's everyday ambition to generate a return, at some point those type of efforts will start to compete with tier 1 strategy. And the problem is to be able to cope with what happens once that competition for capital starts to happen. And I think what we have managed to do is to allow ourselves to in this way of working, to generate the necessary evidence to make the subsequent investment. Because otherwise you are always in a catch-22.
Right. So you've been able to prove that there's value in continuing to invest in a project in this way, so that there's less competition and more collaboration, would you say?
Yeah, I definitely. But I think, I mean, how should I phrase this? If you like it, it is an AstraZeneca quote. If you dislike it, it's a personal comment. So I think that if we knew what we were doing in industry, it wouldn't take 15 years to develop a new product. So we need to expose ourselves to serendipity in a way that from a business logic perspective makes sense. And I mean, we all know the importance of serendipity into research. And I can give you some examples of what we have seen happen in this environment. So we had one company that was working on a disease of totally no interest for AstraZeneca, but of course of real relevance for patients. But we, as many corporations these days, are utterly focused in our objectives. So if that company would have knocked on our door and spoken to my colleagues in business development and said, we are working with something that doesn't interest you, should we collaborate? I can promise you the answer would have been no. Now, when this company sits inside our walls and they work on their stuff of no interest to us, but our scientists suddenly realize that, hey guys, have you tried that mode of action or mechanism or whatever we call it in this domain of science. And the company replies, well, we have thought about it, but we don't have the muscles and the capacity to do it. Well, can we try? And I mean, we would never have exposed ourselves to those insights by sticking to corporate strategy when it comes to how to partner. And I don't say that this replaces the way we normally do business, but I do think it is a necessary complement.
No, that makes sense completely. I mean, you've talked a little bit about serendipity and the power of collaboration and bringing people together with different perspectives. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how the AstraZeneca BioVenture Hub really embodies the principles of the Medici Effect and how bringing together these diverse perspectives are driving innovation, and how the principles of the Medici Effect have truly helped catalyze innovation, at least when you think about how to communicate the approach and what is actually happening. I feel like the approach of the Medici Effect definitely resonates with what you're doing.
No, yeah, I mean, I can tell you when we started this, I had not read the book, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I did in retrospective, and I do think it's like theory and practice brought together when I read it. We have not yet reached the goalpost. I think this has the potential to deliver much more. I think the problem is once you are in the intersection to secure that you take the next step. But we have definitely created an arena where we have brought together diversity in a very structured way, even though it is totally unstructured in reality. But just by, for example, we are a pharma company. We have companies in the hub that work with marine anti-fouling. It's totally remote from what we do. But if you look on the competence base in that company, it really resonates with the way we think about certain things. We speak to companies that works in computer gaming. What ideas could we get when it comes to augmented reality to interact with patients through the skill base that sits in a company that works with computer games for kids? Nobody is betting in getting the attention of these people than these guys. And we struggle with getting attention from patients. We talk to companies that work with real-time data analysis in the automotive industry. An algorithm doesn't care whether the data point comes from a car or from a human body. Mm-hmm. So I think just by, allowing yourself to think outside the box, things just start to happen. I mean, it's hard to put your finger on what it is. And I think that's the beauty of what you guys describe in the Medici Effect. Things happen when you mix different type of skills, different type of cultures. And if you can do that with as few rules as possible, you really catalyze things to happen. And in my perspective, the only thing, or the most important thing that makes humans special is our curiosity. And you need to open up for that to have an impact on your decisions and what you do.
Absolutely. Having an openness to listening, an openness to exploring something that you're unfamiliar with, definitely is how these breakthrough innovations and ecosystems like the BioVenture Hub are able to come to life. You talked a little bit about how you're thinking and how you intersect with other spaces and other industries. Would you have any advice for organizations outside of life sciences on what they could learn from the BioVenture Hub?
So the model has actually been copied by ABB, which is a global company in power supply and robotics. So they have applied it in their industry straight off. We have been speaking to Volvo, which is as you may know, in the automotive and construction vehicle space. And I mean, this is totally industry agnostic, as long as you dare to share.
I love that. Yeah, as long as you dare to share, absolutely. And I mean, the Medici approach is definitely about is industry agnostic as well. So it's having that lens and really finding the benefits of collaborating in ways that are unexpected with industries that you may not naturally collaborate with. So I think collaborating with automotive, and even as you mentioned, sort of video gaming and so forth, is definitely the way to spur breakthrough ideas. And I think it's really exciting because you're learning from each other, and I'm sure many ways that you didn't expect, and maybe much faster than if you were in a room with everyone that sort of had the same background and industry experience, because you're pushing each other in ways that are maybe a little bit more natural.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, the people see this dependent on their background as a, you know, an experiment with financial methods. Somebody see it as an experiment with science, but what it is, it's actually all about culture. And it's about creating an environment where you trust each other. And we work with a lot of small companies, and they basically put themselves in the belly of Goliath when they move here. So I normally say we're in the trust business 100%. And once you get, and you can infuse that trust by many different means. And I think one very easy way to infuse it is to use the business logics, because that resonates with everyone. If they realize that I don't risk my revenue stream or my product by doing this, it becomes so much easier. So I think trust is one of the most important success factors here. And then, dependent on where in the world you are, I think the definition and meaning of trust and the impact of trust is different.
Absolutely. There's definitely those cultural elements that in business around the world, since it's handled so differently, those many different variables and factors that come into allowing for that trust. Could you share an example of a time where sort of trust was a challenge that you were able to overcome? I would love to just share some quick tips on how the folks that are participating here, that are trying to be more innovative, how they might approach that, and how they may combat issues with trust.
It's a super good question. I don't really know how to answer it. To me, it's not what you say, it's what you do that makes a difference in the end. And you asked for examples. So, I mean, I alluded to in the beginning that many of these companies, when they come here, they are scale-ups, they have their intellectual property in place. But during our daily interactions, you can't exclude the possibility that new innovations are created. And we had a situation where our scientists contributed to something that we realized mutually between both us and the small company, that this is actually patentable. And what we did then was to reverse the power positions. We actually allowed them to own the new IP rather than us, even though we were the inventors, because it was really in their area of interest. That said, what we did do was to secure that we had a right to use it, provided we did not compete with their product. So I think, how should I phrase this? The difference between cost and value could be immense. And we very often focus on the cost or perspective. But if you say the cost of helping somebody is only the time it takes, unless you help them in such a way that they can hurt you afterwards. And by trying to focus on value generation rather than cost, you start to think differently. And a funny story on this. So in the early days, I was trying to explain this model to the head of Nasdaq. And as you may know, Nasdaq have a huge sign on Times Square, New York. And I gave him the example that, look, if you're passing a street and you have a blind person standing behind you or beside you, if you bring that person along, it would take you 10 more seconds to cross the street, but you may have saved his or her life. And 3 days later, he sent me a picture of a commercial of the BioVenture Hub at Times Square in New York. And he said, I understood what you meant. So you can create value in it's like the Stone Age economy. It's not complicated what we have done. but it's a bit unorthodox in today's environment.
Absolutely. Definitely not, I agree with you. Not super uncomplicated. It's just, yeah, unorthodox. And I think that we grow up in so much structure, with so many societal expectations on how things should be or how things have been. And naturally, we build on precedent. But what we really need to do in this day and age is unprecedented in order to be truly disruptive. So it's using the history and the information that we have accessible to us and the logic, but challenging it in different ways.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So can you tell me a little bit about what you're most excited about for the future of the BioVenture Hub? Because you said the goalpost has not been reached. There's so much more to do. And I would love to hear more about that. Share with our participants.
I think that at least in our, I would say any business these days, we see more and more industry convergence, that different sectors need to come together in order to innovate. And we are now working on setting up a collaboration with a huge ICT player, a global company. Because what we tend, if we take digital health as an example here, and this is something that really excites me, and we see life science going into the digital space, and we see digital companies approaching life science. And we have some companies in our environment that are, you know, traditional life science companies that embark on digital solutions. And we are not an ICT company. We can't really help them when it comes to what blockchain technology should we use to transfer patient data or whatever. And then we have, in this case, this huge global company in the ICT sector that also has an open innovation system where they support companies in the ICT domain. And I asked them, how many companies do you support that targets life science? And the answer was one, because they couldn't judge the validity of their life science approach. So what we now are doing is to pooling these two open innovation platforms together. So a company that now works in life science and wants to go digital can access the competence of this partner in the BioHub, which is, I would say, one of the top 2-3 in the world. And it's in a totally different industry than ours. But if you combine them, you create a unique environment for innovation to support innovation, I think. That excites me. I also am excited about, I mean, basically what innovation will come out of this. We are only scratching the surface of the potential.
Absolutely. I mean, I know we're so happy to have you as a part of the Medici Effect community, and we look forward to staying with you on this journey and also seeing all the great innovation and the partnerships that you continue to build and the other businesses that you support in their innovation journey. So I want to give a little bit of time for questions, but I want to ask you one more. And this is really focused on how do you see the BioVenture Hub changing Sweden's approach to innovation in the life sciences? Do you see it having a, I mean, outside of pharma, outside of AstraZeneca, and sort of the people in the space that you interact with, but do you see it having an effect on your culture, Sweden, the community, city of Gothenburg?
Oh, yes, I do. I just want to qualify what I'm now about to say. And I think Sweden is a very, very small country. We are not yet 10 million people. It's like a suburb of Peking. It's nothing. Still, we have produced some rather successful global companies. And we are coming from a history of scarce resources when it comes to human capital. So working together is part of our DNA in order to create critical mass in what we do. And I think what we have done with the hub is really to put the finger on the importance of collaboration in order to be successful. And I think that Sweden has realized that you need to build on your own strengths rather than focus on improving your weaknesses. And we often tend to work on our weaknesses instead of focusing on embarking on our strengths. And that's what we, to a great extent, have done here, because it's so much built on the Nordic way of collaborating in order to generate value. And people joke about the Swedish consensus culture and what have you. And I guess you have suffered from it occasionally, having Frank and others in the building. But yes, you can use that to your benefit. And I think that's what we have done here. And I think we are greatly supported by the community around us and in what we do, because in a way, it's very Swedish, I would say. And people tend to like their own home turf.
Okay, that makes sense.
It can be done anywhere, but you need to adopt it to your local values and cultural circumstances.
Absolutely. I think that's great insight. So Magnus, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your learnings, and the amazing work that you've done at the BioVenture Hub with us. If any of our guests are interested in learning more about how to apply the Medici approach to building an innovative ecosystem, I encourage you to reach out to us here at the Medici Group. And I'd like to use the last few minutes that we have here together to allow folks to ask questions.
Sure.
Are there any pieces or components missing that you would like to have but have not managed to get?
Oh, yes. No, we haven't spoken about that, but the answer is yes, and I will explain it. So we have one academic group in the hub today, and what we normally do when industry approach academia is to look for the best scientists to help us solve a problem that we have. What we did here was rather different. We went out to some research teams and said, hey guys, we don't have a problem, but we have this. How can we use existing infrastructure knowledge to truly work on new science rather than applied problem solving? And what I am missing is I would like to see 5 more large international academic groups as part of this ecosystem. So, and we haven't managed to do that so far, simply because our bandwidth is super limited. We're only 4 people working with this in AstraZeneca. And then the rest of people that helps the companies, they are brought in from the rest of the organization.
I see. Wonderful, exciting. Any questions for Magnus? All right. So we have one from Philip. How do you incentivize your team to bring their whole self to work? Do you lead by example?
No, I'm not good at that. Kidding. No, it has been very easy. I mean, if you work in a large organization like we are, and many of our people are super experts. We have 52 nationalities on site here. Every second recruitment is international, and they are often recruited as experts. When they get exposed to work with a small company and face their problems and their view on what they're doing, it's super rewarding because they get exposed to so much new insight and learnings. So I can't say that word. They motivate themselves, basically. It has been very easy to get our people to engage in this.
I see, and sort of bringing all aspects of themselves to help drive innovation in the spaces that they're working in.
No, and here it is important to say that from the outset, we believe that a lot of the learnings will go from us to the small companies. But that's not the case. It's super reciprocal. We have a lot to learn from these small organizations. I mean, they are forced to be innovative in a different way than you are in a large organization with basically unlimited resources. So the learning is truly mutual. And people, everybody loves to learn, and we simply facilitate it.
No, that reciprocity is huge, and I think that it sometimes surprises people. Would you say that folks at the AstraZeneca or folks at AstraZeneca that maybe were a little leery of this sort of collaboration, or people that weren't necessarily completely on board but supported the cause, Can you talk a little bit about how maybe they've been surprised by what they've learned, or like what you've seen
Yeah.
in terms of those interactions?
So most of the people that do engage in this endeavor are very senior people. And
Okay.
I would tend to say that not everyone is suited either, because we can't send in a square corporate figure to support a small company. It wouldn't work. So it requires a certain type of personality to be able to contribute in what we are doing. And we have spent a lot of time educating our people what it is we try to do here. So why are AstraZeneca doing this? And we often get that question because there are no short-term monetary returns for us. It's all about, paving the way for new things to happen. And we have a selected number of people that are the typical go-tos in certain disciplines. So we don't need to engage 100% of our workforce in order to make this work.
I see. So it's really just about providing that support. But I mean, I think AstraZeneca really supporting this cause in the BioVenture Hub is huge in terms of really leading the way in this way of thinking, in this way of operating. And even like you said, even if there's not necessarily a huge monetary value, I think the partnership, the relationship, and what you're doing is so fascinating that those rewards are intangible in some ways.
Yeah, and I think again we are victims of the system here, because you don't find any economic reporting system that takes into account lack of cost. Right. So how do you measure the fact that you learned something for free? It's not part of the way we report finances. We are used to report what it did cost us to learn it, but the day it doesn't cost anything, it disappears out of the books. Right. So I think you need to embark on, I mean, we are 80% trained experimentalists in a company like ours. And we defined experimentation as something that happens in a test tube or in a clinic at a hospital. We don't define business development as an experiment in AstraZeneca. And I think we should dare to experiment with more things than molecules. And that's what we are doing here.
I really love that way of thinking. Dare to experiment outside of sort of the conventional ways, or and really start experiment in every aspect of the business. And I think that looking at the business development through a different lens allows you to innovate in an incredible way. And I mean, we do that here at Medici as well. We are constantly innovating in how we think about every aspect of our business, of our growth, our talent development, and how we interact with other companies and support their growth in this journey. So definitely resonate with that way of thinking. We have time for one more question, if there are any more questions. Give anyone a moment. If there are any more questions, we have time for one more. What's next for the community?
Yeah, so, I could have asked that question as well. That's a good one.
So here at the Medici Group, I mean, we're so excited. The Medici Effect Community is a journey that we've embarked on over the past year. And we've really just found people all over the world that have taken the thought leadership from the Medici Effect to heart, and they've really started to become manifestations of it in their organizations or in the individual work that they're doing. So it's pretty exciting to see, and we've made it our mission now to connect with those folks. And even as you said, Magnus, you hadn't read the book, but now that you have read the book, you see the connections, and it's really about, you are already operating in this way, but it's almost like the Medici Effect put words to what you're doing, essentially. So we're really excited to continue to build our community, to create an opportunity for people who think and behave in this way to connect with each other and learn from each other. So it really is our own sort of ecosystem of innovation and around the thought leadership in the Medici Effect. And we hope to just, over the next year, grow that community more, provide more resources for that community, and help them along their journey. because up to this point, they've really been doing it on their own. And that's amazing. But then what's next? And if the Medici Group and the team here can help support the next step in their journey, that's what we would like to do.
No, and I think the world needs more good innovation. And if we can help each other to create that, I think we will be in a better place one day, eventually, all of us. And we're happy to support this to the best possible way we can. So I really look forward to what this community, I mean, what difference it can make.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to continuing to working with you and the BioVenture Hub. And I want to thank you again, Magnus, for your time and for sharing your experience and your insights. It's really an amazing story, and we want to continue to help you build that.
Super, thanks. So, yeah.
All right, so we'll wrap up. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we will talk to you soon, Magnus.
Yeah, take care, guys. Have a good day.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.